The transmission from Damas colony was still live when the atmosphere caught fire, and every delegate in the Galactic Council watched the clouds turn white as an imperial battle group burned 2 million human civilians under the legal language of frontier pacification. The governor's voice lasted 12 more seconds. She was coughing by then, trying to read the colony registry into the record, so the dead would have names before the datanet went dark. Behind her, emergency sirens were drowning under a deeper sound, the sound of orbital lances punching through weather systems and igniting cities that had never mounted a single gun. Children were running through a hospital corridor. A firefighter was dragging 3 bodies with one hand because the other arm was gone. And above it all, stamped coldly across the Empire's official signal, were the words, "Authorized action, territorial compliance, resistance terminated." No warning, no evacuation corridor, no distinction between militia bunkers and schools. By the time the feed finally collapsed into static, the colony's night side was glowing through the planet's own ash. In that moment, everyone in the chamber understood the same thing. A line had not merely been crossed, it had been erased. The Hall of Accord stayed silent long enough for even the oldest species to feel shame. Then Ambassador Selvar of the Carthine Empire rose with perfect composure and declared that the destruction of Damas had been regrettable but lawful, a necessary correction against human trespass near sovereign imperial lanes. He called the colony a temporary infestation. He described its dead as non-compliant settlers. He suggested Earth should be grateful the Empire had chosen a quick lesson instead of a long campaign. Around him, Allied diplomats shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. The Empire had ruled 47 systems for 8 centuries. It had shattered 3 rivals and absorbed a dozen weaker powers. Humans, by comparison, were new, loud, industrious, annoyingly moral. A species that negotiated hard, built fast, and still spoke as if law should matter more than hierarchy. Most of the chamber assumed they would rage, threaten, posture, and then fold. They had no idea what human silence meant. Ambassador Elena Ward of Earth stood only when the chamber recognized her. And when she did, her face was as still as cut stone. She did not shout. She did not plead. She requested, in a voice so controlled it unsettled the translators, that the Council enter the Damas massacre into permanent record as a civilian extermination event under interstellar law. She demanded the immediate surrender of Grand Admiral Serix Vol, Governor Militant Oren Tall, and the captains of the 7 imperial vessels involved. She demanded unrestricted access to the ruins, reparations to the survivors, and formal censure of the Carthine Empire. Then she said the sentence that would be replayed across the galaxy for the next 100 years. If the Council will not defend the law, Earth will defend the future the law was meant to protect. Some delegates laughed because they mistook restraint for impotence. Selvar smiled openly. He told her humanity had traded itself into confidence. He said Earth had mistaken prosperity for power. He said the Empire would endure long after human anger burned itself out. For 3 days, the Council debated procedure while Damas still smoldered. The Carthine bloc buried motions in committees. The merchant guilds argued sanctions would destabilize the frontier. Neutral worlds called for patience. Patience, while thermal scans revealed tens of thousands still trapped in underground shelters with failing air. Patience, while salvage drones picked bones out of fused glass. patience, while the Empire fortified the lanes leading back to its core worlds. Earth said very little. Terran diplomats filed evidence, casualty lists, orbital trajectories, attack logs, internal imperial orders stolen from battlefield transmissions. Then, Earth withdrew its ambassadors from imperial space. Terran merchant convoys disappeared from trade routes. Human universities recalled exchange staff. Private shipping insurers canceled every policy touching Carthene territory. The Council interpreted it as grief. The Empire interpreted it as retreat. Both were wrong. What the galaxy had never understood about humans was simple. They were not calm because they lacked passion. They were calm because, across the violent centuries of their own rise, they had learned the cost of letting grief make decisions. Humanity had nearly burned itself out before it ever reached the stars. The lesson had scarred them so deeply that it became doctrine. Mourn first. Count everything. Confirm the facts. Then decide not how to hit back, but how to make sure the aggressor could never profit from repeating the act. Most species fought wars for territory, honor, resources, or revenge. Humans, when truly provoked, fought for outcome. They did not ask what punishment felt satisfying in the moment. They asked what future had to be removed from the enemy so this could never happen again. In old Terran academies, the doctrine had a name older than their first warp drives. Prospect denial. Do not merely break the hand that strikes you. Erase its reason for lifting again. The first sign that something was wrong came from the Empire's shipyards above Veus Prime. Nothing exploded. No fleets appeared. No grand speech interrupted the skies. The yard simply stopped. Construction gantries froze mid-assembly. Dockyard AIs began rejecting command input. Fuel transfers reversed themselves and vented propellant into vacuum in glittering white rivers. At the same hour, 3 more military yards in distant sectors reported identical failures. Then the relay stations that coordinated imperial jump lanes started blinking out. Not destroyed, but blind. Their navigation seeds corrupted down to the checksum. Cargo movements halted. Escort schedules collapsed. Patrol fleets received contradictory route data and emerged light minutes from their intended beacons, sometimes inside gravity wells, sometimes in dead zones with no communications at all. Still, the Empire dismissed it as sabotage by dissidents or a freak software cascade. Then the grain reserve world of Neral lost orbital control. Not to invasion, but to a swarm of autonomous cutters that sliced every launch cradle off its military transport ring in under 11 minutes, and vanished before a single Carthene destroyer could lock weapons. By the end of the first week, 17 Imperial logistics hubs had been crippled with surgical precision. Not civilian hospitals, not habitation domes, not food processors. Shipyards, fleet depots, relay arrays, munitions vaults, navigation archives, training academies, recruitment worlds. Anything tied to the Empire's ability to project force beyond the present day. Human strike groups were glimpsed only in fragments. A thermal ghost here, an impossible burn pattern there. A transmission that appeared inside a sealed command network and was gone before anyone traced it. No triumphant broadcasts, no territorial claims, no panic raids. Just systems quietly losing the machinery that made conquest possible. The Empire had expected retaliation in blood and fire. It got an audit of its vulnerabilities performed at relativistic speed. That was when Grand Admiral Serix Val finally understood what Earth had spent the last 30 years doing while everyone mocked humanity for overinvesting in trade. Human freighters had been everywhere. Human engineers had taken contracts on imperial docks, customs nodes, ore elevators, orbital tugs, cryogenic banks, signal relays. Human software serviced merchant exchanges from rim to core. Their diplomats had memorized not only the Empire's laws, but its delays, its dependencies, its assumptions. Every deal had been a sensor, every shipping lane a survey, every denied request a piece of pattern. While the old powers measured strength in dreadnoughts and tribute worlds, humans had mapped the skeleton underneath Empire itself. They knew which 6 foundries produced 80% of Carthine jump field coils. They knew which academies trained the officer caste. They knew the fuel additives unique to the Imperial battleship line. They knew how long Val could sustain fleet operations if 3 depots went dark, then 5, then 9. They had not prepared for war the way the Empire understood war. They had prepared to remove the Empire's tomorrow. Panic arrived slowly at first, then all at once. Imperial frontier governors begged for escorts that could no longer be spared. Subject worlds stopped paying taxes when the fleets enforcing compliance missed their windows or vanished in lane anomalies seeded by human hunter drones. The Council, which had hesitated to condemn a massacre, now begged both sides for restraint as prices spiked and border regions destabilized. Earth answered every request with the same statement: surrender the architects of Damas, release all occupied civilians from Imperial detention, submit military navigation corps for inspection, accept arbitration and reparations. Until then, Terran operations would continue. Selvar called the demands absurd. The Emperor himself appeared in a rare holo address and vowed to teach humanity the difference between commerce and sovereignty. 2 hours later, the transmission hubs that had carried his speech detonated from charges hidden inside maintenance lattices, built by a subcontractor owned 3 shell layers down by a Terran holding group.
Humiliation enraged the Empire more than loss. That made the next decision inevitable. Unable to find the main Terran fleet, Val chose spectacle. He assembled what remained of 3 battle groups and struck the human colony world of Arden Reach, a mining settlement on the edge of a red dwarf system, announcing to the Council in advance that this time the lesson would be public. The Empire wanted fear back. It wanted footage of humans running, human worlds burning, human diplomats begging. Instead, as the Imperial ships dropped from jump, every civilian habitat on Arden Reach powered down at once. The colony went dark so completely it looked abandoned. Val hesitated for 7 seconds. That hesitation doomed him. The moon above the planet split open along equatorial seams, and what the Empire had catalogued for years as a geological survey station unfolded into a ring of mass accelerators buried beneath 50 meters of rock. The first volley tore through the lead battleship before its shields fully cycled. The second hit the tankers. The third was not kinetic at all, but a cloud of machine-guided tungsten chaff accelerated to murderous fractions of light speed, turning the space around the Imperial formation into a storm of invisible knives. Then, the Terran fleet arrived from the system's outer dark, where it had been waiting beyond passive detection for 31 hours. They did not charge. They closed in layered formation, cold and mathematically precise, their drives pulsing blue in the dim red light. Terran carriers released autonomous lances that did not chase ships, but drive cones, forcing Carthine captains to choose between maneuver and survival. Cruisers fired in silence, their rounds arriving on predicted vectors the Empire thought impossible. A destroyer trying to flank found its navigation computer rewritten mid-burn and slammed into its own escort screen. Val ordered a breakthrough toward the planet. The moon guns cut that corridor apart. He ordered retreat. Human interdiction mines bloomed behind him like a second fleet. By the time the battle ended, Arden Reach was untouched. The 3 Imperial battle groups were wreckage, drifting around a moon the Empire had never once considered worth scanning. Humanity had just answered atrocity with something worse than fury. Preparation. The recording of Val's defeat hit the Council before the debris cooled. So did another file, one Earth had withheld until then. It was the full command transcript from Damas, not edited, not curated. Grand Admiral Val had not merely authorized the attack.
He had insisted the colony's civilian shelters be struck first, so the demonstration would survive in memory. There it was, in his own voice. The Empire had not committed an excess under battlefield pressure. It had chosen terror as policy. Several neutral delegations abandoned the Carthene chamber that same hour. Insurance syndicates froze Imperial assets. Subject species who had endured generations of occupation began openly broadcasting for Terran contact. Rebellions ignited across systems the Empire once held by myth as much as force. And still, Earth did not slow down. That was the part the galaxy found hardest to understand. Human operations did not become sloppier as they expanded. They became cleaner. Terran fleets bypassed capitals to cut fabrication worlds. Special teams took command archives intact rather than vaporizing them. Civilian food shipments to occupied species increased under Terran escort, even while Imperial military convoys were hunted to extinction. One famous image from the war showed a human marine kneeling in the ash of a liberated moon, offering water to a wounded alien child, from a species whose government had voted against sanctioning Damas. That image terrified the Empire more than any explosion. It meant the humans were not losing themselves. They were staying exactly who they were, while dismantling everything the Empire believed permanent. Weeks turned into 2 months, and the Carthene future started vanishing in measurable increments. 4 naval academies gone, 7 shipyards offline beyond repair, long-range navigation seeds corrupted across 23 sectors, officer succession records exposed, tribute chains broken, colonial charters declared void by liberated worlds under Terran protection. Most catastrophic of all, the Empire's central predictive engine, an ancient strategic intelligence housed beneath the capital ecumenopolis of Ilir, was infiltrated through trade architecture no one remembered humans had helped optimize. It did not explode. It simply opened every sealed war projection, every annexation timetable, every secret police ledger, every extermination contingency, and transmitted them to the entire galactic net. Overnight, the Empire lost not just military credibility, but political gravity. Its allies fled. Its vassals revolted. Its own provincial elites began negotiating separate peace terms. Earth had found the lever that mattered. Not how to kill the Empire, how to make belief in it impossible. At last, the Emperor agreed to parley. He sent word through the Council that the Empire would consider compensation and a border review if Earth halted its offensive. Elena Ward arrived in the Hall of Accord with the same unreadable expression she had worn the day Damas died. She listened to the offer. She listened to Selvar speak of mutual de-escalation, tragic misunderstandings, the necessity of preserving order. Then she placed a small black shard on the council dais. At first, no one recognized it. Then the sensors identified it as fused silicate recovered from Damas, still carrying traces of human bone. Ward said nothing for a long moment. When she finally spoke, the chamber leaned in because even now, after all of it, humans inspired a strange need to know where the line truly was. "There will be no restoration," she said. "There will be surrender, reparations, trials, and the permanent dismantling of imperial force projection. You burned a colony to secure obedience. You do not get to negotiate from the ashes." The Emperor refused. So Earth ended the war. The final campaign did not begin with a charge on the capital. It began with the silent closure of every exit. Terran interdiction platforms, deployed months earlier as disguised freight buoys and sensor nodes, activated across the core approaches and folded Carthene jump geometry into chaos. Fleet groups trying to consolidate around Elir emerged scattered across light hours, easy prey for waiting Terran hunters. Communications degraded to courier speed. Ammunition stockpiles detonated when sabotage codes reached their expiration triggers. Then the Terran 1st and 6th fleets entered the capital system from opposite vectors, while a third emerged above the star itself, using a gravitational insertion maneuver no other power had ever attempted, because the margin for error was smaller than fear usually allowed. The Carthene home armada formed to resist and died in beautiful lines, ship after ship cut out of battle before its crews fully understood how many overlapping kill webs humans had laid. There was no desperate brawl, no heroic last stand worthy of imperial myth, just a machine of war discovering that someone calmer had already solved it. Elir's orbital defenses held for 19 minutes. Terran strike craft carved their power relays apart. Marine teams captured the throne station's command spindle intact. The Emperor was found not in a bunker, but in a sealed observatory, staring at the tactical feed as the icons of dynasties, fleets, and bloodlines vanished from the screen one by one. According to the testimony later entered at trial, his first question to the human commander was not why Earth had come or what terms it demanded. It was whether humanity had intended all along to conquer the Empire from within. The Terran commander, Admiral Naomi Quist, reportedly answered with perfect sincerity. "No," she said. "We intended to live beside you." Then she ordered the imperial colors lowered. The trials lasted a year. Grand Admiral Val stood in chains while survivors from Damas described firestorms, collapsed shelters, and voices on military channels joking about teaching mammals atmospheric obedience. Governor Oren Tal tried to invoke military necessity until Terran legal teams and council investigators buried him under archived orders, predictive models, and recorded intent. Selvar, who had smiled in the council while a colony burned on live transmission, was forced to hear the casualty registry read in full. Not every sentence from those proceedings is remembered now. One is. When asked why Earth had not retaliated in kind against imperial population centers, Ambassador Ward answered, "Because our purpose was never to become you. Our purpose was to make sure there would never be another you." The statement spread farther than any fleet. In the settlement that followed, the Carthene Empire was not exterminated. That would have been simpler, more emotional, less human. Instead, it was broken with frightening precision. Its occupied worlds were released under council protection. Its fleet tonnage was capped below meaningful aggression. Its war academies were dissolved. Its jump foundries were dismantled under Terran supervision. Its strategic archives were opened to every former subject species. Reparations were collected not in symbolic medals or apologies, but in decades of labor, reconstruction capacity, agricultural support, and habitat fabrication for the worlds it had scarred. The imperial species survived. Their civilization did too. But the thing called empire, the shape of tomorrow it had assumed was inevitable, was gone. Earth had not burned their cities. Earth had erased their future as conquerors. The galaxy changed after that. Council law, once decorative around the powerful, acquired teeth because everyone now knew what happened when it did not. Minor species began requesting Terran mediators in disputes that once would have gone to larger patrons. Military academies across the stars rewrote their doctrine sections on human conflict behavior. New terms entered diplomatic language: Terran patience event, prospect denial threshold, Damas precedent. And in private briefings, admirals warned their governments of the most dangerous human trait of all. Not rage, not technology. Memory. Humans remembered injury institutionally. They archived it, studied it, named it, and then built futures around never permitting it again. That was what made them terrifying. They did not need hatred to become unstoppable. Years later, the ruins of Damas were still there, preserved in part beneath a memorial shield that kept the fused planes and collapsed towers exactly as they had been found after the firestorm. Delegations came from across the galaxy to walk the blackened ground. Some came from species once loyal to the Empire. Some came from worlds that had mocked humanity for overreacting. Many left in silence. The names of the dead were etched into a ring of dark metal visible from orbit, not as propaganda, but as warning. Because that was the final human lesson, the one the galaxy learned too late to spare the Empire. Compassion was not weakness. Law was not decoration. Restraint was not surrender. And a species that spent its strength building peace would, if forced, spend that same strength with terrifying discipline to punish those who mistook mercy for inability. By then, children on liberated worlds were already growing up with a different understanding of humanity. Not as loud traders from a young blue planet. Not as emotional primates with too many opinions about ethics. But as the civilization that had looked at an atrocity, endured the insult of delay, the mockery of empires, the cowardice of institutions, and still answered not with chaos, but with judgment. Slow, exact, final. They had crossed the stars wanting neighbors. They had been given enemies. And when the test came, the galaxy discovered something it could never again pretend not to know. Humans were at their most dangerous not when they lost control, but when they kept it. In the end, the Empire's survivors told the story differently than everyone else. They did not speak first of the fleets they lost or the worlds that broke away. They spoke of the moment they realized Earth was not trying to defeat them in battle. Earth was reaching into the structure of their civilization and removing every tomorrow in which imperial violence still worked. That understanding arrived too late, usually in a dark command center, while screens went out one by one and supply projections collapsed into zeros. Too late, while officers who had laughed at human warnings began calculating how many generations it would take to rebuild what had been stripped away in weeks. Too late, when they finally understood the difference between winning a war and surviving a human response. Earth did not answer the burning of Damas with fire. Earth answered it with the end of empire.